Have you ever felt like something inside you is trying to wake up? Almost like a quiet voice calling you back to a place you cannot fully explain, but somehow deeply recognize. Maybe you clicked on this video out of curiosity, or maybe something in you is tired of carrying questions alone. Either way, what you are about to hear is not just information. These are the words of Christ. Words that have crossed centuries, cultures, and storms and still remain powerful enough to change the atmosphere inside a human heart. And if you stay with me, there is a real chance that something begins to shift inside you too. Imagine this for a moment. What if everything you have been searching for, the peace, the clarity, the direction, the sense of purpose, was hidden in teachings you have heard before, but never truly experienced? Most people know that Jesus spoke parables and messages of wisdom, but very few ever stop long enough to let those teachings actually speak back to them. Here's the part that shocks almost everyone. The power of Jesus' words does not come from religion. It comes from transformation. His words were never meant to decorate walls or be repeated without emotion. They were meant to lift, to heal, to confront, to rebuild, and to awaken. And if you have ever felt lost or overwhelmed, if you have ever felt like your mind is running in circles, or your prayers sometimes feel unanswered, I want you to know something important. You are not broken for feeling that way. You are human. Jesus never pushed away people who struggled. He sat with the confused. He welcomed the tired. He comforted the anxious, and he spoke life into people who felt forgotten. So if you are here with doubts, worries, or even a little bit of fear, you are exactly the kind of person he always stopped for. What you feel is valid. What you need matters. And what you seek is closer than you think. But now comes the part that will keep you here until the end. What if the parables you learned as a child were actually blueprints for emotional and spiritual strength? What if the short phrases Jesus spoke were not just comforting lines, but scientifically powerful instructions that calm the nervous system and rewire thought patterns? Modern research shows that spoken truth can reshape the brain. Jesus was giving these tools long before science ever discovered them. And what if, buried inside these teachings, there is a message that fits your exact situation today? A message that answers the fear you never say out loud, or the confusion you hide even from yourself. For the next 30 minutes, we will walk through the words of Christ in a way that feels personal, relatable, and alive. We will explore parables that reveal the heart of God, messages that lift you out of emotional heaviness, and teachings that have guided people through some of the hardest moments of their lives. By the end of this video, you will not only understand these teachings, you will feel them. You will see why millions around the world find hope in these words and why they still carry power in a world filled with noise, pressure, and uncertainty. So take a breath, slow your thoughts, open a small space inside you for something new to enter. Because the same Jesus who spoke to fishermen, outcasts, families, and crowds is about to speak to you too. Not from the past, but into your present. And you might be surprised at how deeply his words find you. When Jesus taught through parables, he was not trying to sound poetic or mysterious. He was reaching into the deepest parts of human experience using simple, everyday situations. Each parable carries a truth that cannot be forgotten once it enters your heart. Stories have a way of bypassing defenses and opening the mind to revelation, and Jesus knew this perfectly. That is why his parables survive every generation. They speak to people who are broken, people who are searching, people who feel distant, and people who are ready to grow. They speak to us because they are not just stories. They are spiritual mirrors. The parable of the sower is one of the clearest examples of this. Jesus describes a farmer planting seeds in different types of soil. Some fall on rocky ground, some among thorns, some on the path, and some in good soil. At first, It sounds like a simple farming lesson, but Jesus was revealing something deeply personal. Your heart is the soil. The seed is His word. When your heart is hardened by disappointment or fear, truth can land but cannot take root. When your heart is filled with distractions, worries, or constant noise, truth grows but gets choked. But when your heart is open and ready, even a small truth from God can grow into strength that carries you through seasons you thought you would never survive. Modern psychology confirms that emotional receptiveness determines how deeply a message transforms a person. Jesus taught this long before any scientific study existed. Another powerful parable is the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus explains that a shepherd leaves 99 sheep to search for the one that wandered away. This sounds risky and illogical to some, but Jesus was revealing the nature of God in a way no theology book could ever describe. God does not love you based on your performance. He loves you because you belong to Him. He does not abandon you when you lose your way. He pursues you. Many people live with silent guilt, believing God is disappointed in them. But this parable breaks that lie completely. You matter enough for God to come after you. Studies on emotional well-being show that feeling valued reduces anxiety and increases resilience. Jesus provided this reassurance through a story about a shepherd and a sheep that refused to stay close. We also need to revisit the parable of the Good Samaritan. This is more than a moral lesson. It is a direct challenge to the human heart. Jesus describes a man who is beaten, ignored by religious figures, and finally rescued by someone society considered an outsider. The message is clear. Compassion is not about who you think deserves help. Compassion is about choosing to lift someone even when it interrupts your plans. It is easy to feel spiritual. It is harder to stop for someone who is hurting. Jesus uses this parable to show that love is measured by action, not intention. And this still confronts us today. Real faith requires involvement. Real love requires sacrifice. And real character is revealed not in the comfort of our routines, but in the moments when compassion demands our participation. These parables build a foundation. They reveal the heart of God, the priorities of Jesus, and the kind of inner world He wants you to develop. They prepare us to understand His spoken words in a deeper way, because His teachings were not designed for passive listeners. They were designed for transformation. And now that your heart is open and your spirit is awake, we can step into the words Jesus spoke that continue to guide and heal people everywhere. When Jesus spoke, He was not giving motivational lines or religious statements. He was speaking directly to the human condition, addressing fears, doubts, exhaustion, and confusion that still exist today. His words carry a kind of clarity that cuts through emotional fog, a kind of peace that confronts anxiety, and a kind of authority that awakens courage. And the more deeply you listen, the more you realize His teachings are not meant to sit on pages. They are meant to reshape the way you think and feel. They are living words designed to rebuild the inner world of a person who feels overwhelmed, uncertain, or weary. One of the most repeated phrases Jesus spoke was "fear not." At first, it sounds like comfort, but it is actually an instruction that rewires how the brain responds to stress. Modern studies on neuroscience show that reassurance from a trusted source reduces activity in the fear centers of the brain. Jesus understood this long before science existed. When He said, "Fear not," He was giving permission for your mind to step out of panic and into trust. Fear may still exist, but it no longer has control. It no longer dictates your decisions or steals your peace. It becomes a feeling instead of a master. Another powerful phrase is "follow me." These two simple words carry direction, identity, and purpose. Many people feel lost because they are pulled in 1,000 directions by opinions, emotions, pressures, or expectations. Jesus simplifies everything with an invitation that cuts through the noise. Follow me. Not follow your fear. Not follow your mistakes. Not follow the voices that make you feel unworthy. Follow me. It means letting His voice become the compass that guides you when you feel confused or overwhelmed. This instruction offers stability, and stability is something the mind desperately seeks when life feels chaotic. Then there is one of the most comforting invitations Jesus ever gave. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Notice that He does not say, come to me when you have everything under control. He says, come as you are, tired, drained, confused, and carrying weight you feel you cannot hold anymore. Emotional exhaustion is a real psychological condition, and it affects millions of people. Jesus addresses it with a simple invitation to bring your heaviness to Him. Rest is not escape. Rest is presence. Rest is letting God hold what was crushing you. Another life-changing statement is, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. This peace is not the fragile kind that disappears when problems rise. It is the internal stability that remains even in the middle of storms. Modern research shows that spiritual practices reduce the stress response in the body. Jesus offered this peace long before any study could measure its effects. His peace is not dependent on circumstances. It is rooted in the presence of God, a presence that anchors you when everything around you feels unstable. When you allow His words to settle inside you, they become a shield for your mind. We also need to look at His words about forgiveness. Jesus taught that forgiving others was essential, not just spiritually, but emotionally. Studies today show that unforgiveness increases stress, anxiety, and even physical tension. Jesus knew that holding on to resentment destroys the soul from the inside. When He said forgive, He was not asking you to ignore pain. He was giving you a path to freedom. Forgiveness is not saying what happened is acceptable. It is saying you refuse to let the wound define you any longer. His words free you from chains you did not realize you were carrying. Finally, Jesus spoke often about faith, not as blind belief, but as trust in the character of God. He said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. He was not exaggerating. He was showing that even the smallest amount of trust can produce transformation. Faith is not about feeling strong. It is about choosing to believe, even when everything in your life tells you not to. And when you hold on to that small seed of trust, God grows it into something that can sustain you during seasons of uncertainty. Each of these statements carries the ability to reshape how you handle fear, pain, confusion, and pressure. And when you begin to live them, not just hear them, they transform the atmosphere of your entire life. These words prepare us for the next part, where we explore how Jesus' teachings shape character, behavior, and the choices that determine the direction of your future. The teachings of Jesus were always practical. He did not speak to impress crowds or create religious debates. He spoke to transform the inner structure of a person. Because true change begins on the inside, long before it appears on the outside. His teachings were aimed at the heart, the mind, the motives, and the decisions we make when no one is watching. And the deeper you look at what He said, the more you realize His words carry a blueprint for emotional health, strong character, and a life built on stability rather than fear. One of the most challenging yet freeing teachings Jesus gave was love your enemies. At first, this seems impossible or even unreasonable. Why would Jesus ask people to love someone who hurt them? But this teaching is not about accepting mistreatment. It is about refusing to let bitterness poison your identity. When you hold anger inside, your nervous system stays in a constant state of stress. Studies show that unforgiveness elevates cortisol levels and disrupts emotional regulation. Jesus understood this long before science proved it. Loving your enemies does not mean trusting them again. It means releasing yourself from the emotional chains that keep you connected to the wound. It is a path to internal freedom. Another profound teaching is do not worry about tomorrow. In a world filled with pressure, uncertainty, and constant comparison, worry has become a daily companion for many. But worry does something destructive. It makes you suffer twice, once in your imagination and once in reality. Jesus teaches that worry does not add a single hour to your life. Instead, it drains energy from the present moment, leaving you tired before anything even happens. When Jesus says, "Do not worry," he is not dismissing responsibility. He is redirecting your focus. He wants you anchored in today, where your strength exists, rather than drowning in scenarios that may never come. This teaching restores clarity and reduces mental overload. Jesus also taught that the greatest among you will be the one who serves. This reverses the logic of the world, where greatness is measured by power, status, or achievements. But Jesus reveals a truth that many leaders and psychologists now agree on. Real greatness comes from contribution. Serving others increases joy, builds humility, and strengthens relationships. When you lift someone else, something inside you expands rather than diminishes. Jesus teaches that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less often. This mindset produces resilience because you stop living to prove something and start living with purpose. Another key teaching is let your yes be yes and your no be no. Jesus was revealing the importance of integrity. When your words and actions match, you create internal alignment. Integrity reduces anxiety because you are no longer living in conflict with your own conscience. People who live with honesty and clarity experience more emotional stability than those who constantly shift their identity to impress others. Jesus calls his followers to live with consistency, because consistency builds trust, and trust builds strong relationships. Jesus also teaches about the importance of forgiveness, not just for the person who offended you, but for yourself. Unforgiveness becomes a weight that grows heavier with time. Jesus teaches that releasing others frees you from the emotional burden that has been draining your strength. Forgiveness takes courage, vulnerability, and maturity, but it is one of the most powerful paths to healing. When you forgive, you create space inside your heart where peace can finally enter. Another powerful teaching is seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. This means aligning your priorities with what truly matters. Many people chase success, approval, comfort, or validation and still feel empty. Jesus reveals that when your focus is on God, everything else finds its proper place. Seeking God first brings direction, calm, and wisdom. It reduces the internal conflict that comes from chasing 100 desires at once. When you focus on God, you stop living in confusion and begin living in clarity. We also need to consider his teaching about building your life on the rock instead of the sand. Jesus explains that storms will come to everyone, without exception. No one escapes hardship, loss, disappointment, or unexpected change. But the foundation you build your life on determines whether you stand or collapse. The rock represents God, truth, and obedience. The sand represents temporary solutions, emotional impulsiveness, or shallow beliefs. When storms come, only one foundation remains strong. This teaching is not meant to scare you, but to strengthen you. Jesus wants you anchored in something that does not break. The teachings of Jesus are a manual for emotional strength, spiritual depth, and wise decision-making. They shape character. reveal blind spots, and give direction in moments when everything feels uncertain. When you begin to apply these teachings, not just hear them, your life starts to transform in ways you did not expect. And now we move to the final part, where all these truths come together in a message of hope, restoration, and calling that speaks directly into your present moment. When the teachings of Jesus move from something we hear to something we live, everything begins to shift. It does not happen all at once, and it certainly does not happen perfectly, but it happens deeply. His words are different from any other words, because they do not just inform, they transform. They reach the places inside us that no motivational speech or temporary inspiration can reach. And as they sink into our thoughts and emotions, they begin shaping the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, and the way we see the world. One of the first things that changes is your sense of identity. For so long, many people carry labels placed on them by mistakes, failures, or painful memories. But Jesus speaks identity that is rooted in truth rather than trauma. He calls people beloved, forgiven, renewed, and restored. When he spoke to the woman caught in adultery, he did not define her by her past. He defined her by her potential. When he welcomed tax collectors, he did not see them as society saw them. He saw who they could become. When his words enter your heart, you begin to see yourself as someone capable of change, someone valuable to God, and someone created with purpose. This renewed identity becomes the foundation for emotional healing. Another transformation happens in the way you deal with fear. Everyone faces fear, whether it is fear of the future, fear of loss, fear of rejection, or fear of not being enough. But Jesus constantly repeats, "Do not be afraid." He knows fear can paralyze the mind and shut down possibilities before they even start. Studies in neuroscience show that fear shrinks the brain's ability to process information creatively. But Jesus offers a different path. He invites you to trust in God's presence, reminding you that you are not facing life alone. When His words fill your thoughts, fear loses its authority over your decisions. You begin to walk with confidence, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer carrying your battles in your own strength. Parenthetical. Relationships also begin to change. The teachings of Jesus demand a level of humility and forgiveness that most of us cannot reach on our own. But when His words enter the heart, they soften pride and break down emotional walls. You start choosing patience instead of anger, understanding instead of assumption, and grace instead of accusations. Jesus teaches that the measure you use for others will be measured back to you. This creates relational maturity because you become aware of how your actions affect people around you. You become someone who builds rather than someone who wounds. And as your character shifts, your relationships start to carry more peace and fewer unnecessary conflicts. Then comes the transformation of purpose. Many people spend years trying to figure out why they are here, chasing careers, achievements, or approval. But Jesus simplifies this with clarity. He says, "Follow me." And in that simple call, everything begins to align. Following Jesus does not erase your dreams. It purifies them. It replaces the need for validation with a desire for meaning. His words show that purpose is not about doing something impressive. It is about living in love, truth, and service. This creates a life direction that is stable, meaningful, and fulfilling in a way that external success cannot offer. Another powerful transformation happens in your inner peace. When Jesus says, "My peace I give you," He is not talking about a feeling that depends on circumstances. He is talking about a supernatural stability that remains even in the middle of storms. This peace calms your mind, reduces emotional reactivity, and helps you navigate challenges with clarity rather than chaos. When His words are living inside you, peace becomes a posture rather than a moment. You begin to breathe differently, think differently, respond differently. You stop being tossed around by every problem and start standing firm, even when life becomes heavy. Your decision-making also becomes stronger. The teachings of Jesus act like a compass. They guide you away from impulsive choices and toward wise ones. They help you see long-term consequences rather than just short-term comfort. They teach you to respond with wisdom rather than react out of emotion. When you internalize His teachings about humility, integrity, patience, truth, and compassion, your decisions begin to reflect these qualities. This leads to fewer regrets, more stability, and a life built on principles rather than pressure. And then there is hope. Jesus constantly brings hope into places where hope has died. He speaks life into situations that seem impossible. He reminds you that God can restore, rebuild, and redeem anything surrendered to Him. Hope is powerful. Psychological studies show that people who live with hope have higher resilience and higher emotional stability. Jesus gives a hope that is not based on logic, but on faith. A hope that reminds you that even in darkness, God is still working. When His words enter your heart, hopelessness loses its grip. Finally, there is transformation in the way you see eternity. Jesus reminds us that life is more than what we see. This world is temporary, but the soul is eternal. His words pull your focus beyond the pressures of today and into the reality of God's kingdom. This gives you perspective, helping you navigate suffering with endurance and blessings with gratitude. You begin to realize that every moment, every decision, and every act of love carries eternal significance. When you bring all these transformations together, identity renewed, fear conquered, relationships strengthened, purpose clarified, peace established, decisions guided, hope restored, and eternity embraced, you begin to understand why the words of Jesus are so powerful. They were not meant to be admired from a distance. They were meant to be lived. And when you live them, your life becomes a reflection of His presence. You walk with a calm that other people notice. You love with a depth that surprises even you. You endure hardships with a strength that you did not have before. You become a living example of what happens when the teachings of Jesus become the foundation of a life. And this is the invitation of this entire video, not to simply admire the words of Jesus, but to experience them, to let them shape you, to let them heal you, to let them guide you. His words are alive, and they are waiting to take root inside you so that your life can grow in ways you never imagined.